Welcome to the first community forum that we have going on this week. We'll ask everybody to ask your questions in the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A button, you click on that and then just type your questions into that. So we're gonna start off with our first question of, will remote or virtual learning look different this year or this fall, look different than it did in the spring?
Oh, and good evening to everyone out there. Thank you, Brian. That was Brian Radowitz, our communication specialist. My name is Jim Franchini, I'm the superintendent, and I'm joined by Matt Layden, who's our assistant superintendent. We thank everyone for joining us who's able to join us tonight. For those who can't, we are recording, and we'll be able to get this link up for people to view it at their convenience. The first question involving the type of learning, actually, I'll let Matt answer that one, as Matt is really been overseeing our teaching and learning for the district. So Matt, do you want to take that first one?
Sure. We know that what we saw this past spring was really what we're calling emergency remote teaching. It was a response to a crisis with little time to plan or prepare. And while it was successful in getting us through the year and helping us meet the needs of most of our learners, it was by no means a perfect system and nothing that we were satisfied with in its totality. So thinking about what we want for the fall, we know that what we're planning for remote instruction this fall will look very different. We expect to have schedules. We expect to have students logging in at certain times throughout the day, depending on their class schedule, with live interactions with teachers. So by and large, we know where we fell short in the spring and have already addressed that in the schedules, which are part of our reopening plan, to make sure that our kids are engaging on a daily basis with their teachers.
Okay, our next question is, how often will children be able to remove their masks during the day?
That's a good question. At this time, we don't have any details on that. We're working through that. We know that we are going to schedule structured mask breaks during the day. What exactly that will look like, I don't know at this point. It's one of those details that we are working through. I would imagine it'll look a little bit different at each level, and even probably within buildings where you have a range of K to 5, where there's 6 different grade levels in there. It may look different within even a building. But we're working on it. We know we are going to provide structured time for breaks. We'll be able to utilize the outside for that. Hallway spaces, variety of options, maybe including the classroom. The guidance has the fact that students are going to be socially distanced, which we're going to be doing, and then the mask breaks will be able to assist the students who we're requiring to wear masks. So.
And what is the discipline policy for students who do not keep their masks on?
So for the students who don't keep their masks on, our code of conduct, we talked with our attorney about this. The code of conduct, we feel, already addresses that issue. So the code of conduct, excuse me, requires students to follow reasonable teacher directives. So because it's the guidance of the school and because it's what we're doing, we'll make sure that students are following that code of conduct in terms of following those directives. And then failure to do so really would fall under insubordination. And that, again, is in our code of conduct already. And principals at all the levels have a variety of things they do for insubordination. Again, we try and take each case individually, and we try to be sensitive to the K-12 spectrum, knowing that things are different at each level with each student. So it'll be handled case by case, but the code of conduct does back up the use of the mask. Also, in the words of our attorney, we're supported by the guidance from both the Department of Health and the State Education Department. So the masks, required masks, will be fine and be allowed, and we'll enforce it like we do other code of conduct violations.
So when will we get detailed information on full remote class instruction?
I can take that one, Dr. Franchini.
Matt, you want to?
Sure. So we know that the governor on Friday identified that was one of the 3 things we would need to post on our website It actually is already part of our reopening plan, which is on our website. We have a section devoted to remote instruction, which includes the schedule that we would be following. So we're still waiting kind of to clarify exactly if there's anything else we need to include that we've already, that we didn't include in the original plan. But as I mentioned in the answer to the first question, we've addressed some of the shortcomings of the remote learning that took place in the spring with a much more robust plan for the fall, which you can find in our reopening plan.
Now, what will the process be in the event of someone within one of the school buildings test positive? Does that building close? Does the district close? Is there a period of time for the closure?
So there's a few things with that. Up until about a week ago, I think it was a week ago today actually, the governor made some comments regarding testing that were new to the districts, right? So we were not expecting to do our own COVID testing. And that has been clarified in subsequent guidance in terms of what's expected from the field. At this point, we are under the belief that the testing piece is still going to follow what happens at the county level from the Department of Health. So if we have a student to test positive, then our first call, our main call, is to the Rensselaer County Department of Health. We have a very strong relationship with the Department of Health. We've had that relationship prior to the pandemic. Our nurses are in contact with them all the time. We've worked with them on other issues, big and small. That relationship has only been strengthened. So if there's an issue where we have a student or a staff member who tests positive, our first call is to the Department of Health at the county level. And honestly, the Department of Health also will be contacting us if they find out of a case prior to us finding out, which could happen. So there's two-way communication. The Department of Health is available 24/7. We've exchanged contact information so that we can be in constant communication if need be. And then once we have a situation where we have that happen, if that was to happen here, we would contact the Department of Health and they would guide us and lead us through the next steps. So it's our nurse to the Department of Health. Department of Health would then provide us guidance in terms of the contact tracing, in terms of the required testing, and in terms of the need to shut down or close down a class, a wing, a building, a school, whatever the case may be. The county, we've talked extensively about this. We have a weekly call with the Department of Health. It's the county executive and the Commissioner of Health, and they've been unbelievably supportive and helpful to the school districts on that call. It's all the Rensselaer County superintendents, and we're all in the same communication strategy. We're all in the same plan. We're all just notifying the Department of Health who will get that to us. In fact, the governor asked for some clarification regarding what we're doing, and that wording is going to be coming from the Department of Health to the school districts in the county. So we'll all have the same information, using the same process and the same protocol throughout Rensselaer County.
I'll just remind everybody that if you want to ask a question, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Just click on that and type your question in there. I know there's a few people that came in after we started. So next question, is it confirmed that there will be a distance-only learning option for the year?
I assume the question, if I'm understanding correctly, would mean, is there going to be the parent choice to be virtual? And we've put in our communications that we're waiting to make sure that was legally allowed and provided. At this point, we do believe it is. We have not received anything in writing saying that it is for sure, but us and pretty much every other district that I know of are operating under that assumption that there is going to be parent choice, and that choice would be for students to go virtual if they choose, and that choice is available K-12. So we are awaiting further guidance, but we do believe it's going to be a reality.
Will full remote class instruction be taught by regional teachers or Averill Park teachers?
I can jump in and
it's
sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I think it's important. We haven't really it's a semantics thing, but we've talked a lot about the use of the term remote, virtual, distance. So I think one of the things we want to clarify is when we talk about remote learning, that's essentially the model that if we were to be closed down like we were in the spring and all of our students were being taught from home, we're calling that remote learning. Virtual learning in our minds is really what is happening if a parent chooses to keep their child at home. So they are different things, remote versus virtual. So I just want to make sure we get the semantics clarified as we move forward with answering some of these questions. I guess, Brian, can you repeat that now with that in mind?
Sure. So the question was, will full remote class instruction be taught by regional teachers or AP teachers? So if the parent chooses to have their child learn full-time at home, will they be taught by regional or Averill Park?
At this time, we believe it's going to be, the teaching will be done by Averill Park teachers. There has been conversations, to be honest, at the BOCES level, and our BOCES involves multiple counties, or it's Columbia, Greene, and Rensselaer counties. There has been conversations at the BOCES level regarding some form of a combined program for us to be able to utilize either Questar, which is our BOCES, their teachers, or to share teachers amongst ourselves. It's very late for that to start, to be quite honest. I mean, we're at August 10th. Anytime you're looking at some form of a distance learning model, which is what that essentially would be, that usually takes months and months of planning. So if something was to develop and if it would benefit our kids, we'd certainly be open to it, obviously. But the plan for us right now is to use Averill Park teachers, K through 12, to deliver the instruction where possible and whenever possible. That would be our plan and our hope and our goal, certainly wherever we can.
Will all of the same classes be available for the virtual or remote learning as it is for hybrid in the middle school and high school classes? Will this be the same for honors and AP classes?
It is our hope that that would work to that. The issue as you get, especially into the high school and especially with the singleton type courses that are only offered once, and those are your honors classes or some of your accelerated courses, it is extremely challenging from a staffing point of view. Our hope is certainly, our plan is certainly to provide a student with the same schedule if they were virtual as if when they were here. Can I honestly tell people right now that 100% is going to happen? No. A lot of it depends on the numbers. And, you know, our survey closes on the 12th. We know we're going to have to probably follow up with people to either get clarifying information or people who just didn't get a chance to get back to us. So we're really looking to get that data kind of very solid by the end of this week, because we need to start hashing out these type of questions. As you can imagine, there's many moving parts, whether it's food service, transportation, building schedules, class size, singleton classes like this. So the earlier we can get that information, the better plan we'll be able to put in place. Again, our hope, our plan, our desire would be to provide a student who's virtual with the same experience they would have had in person. But I can't sit here and tell you honestly that will happen. It'll be dependent upon a lot of things, some in our control and some not. Some is a matter of staffing. We're also being very cost conscious, right? We were trying to be good stewards of the district's resources financially, and we don't want to add staff necessarily to create a situation where we're bringing people in just to do some of these things. So we're going to balance it out and do the best we can, putting all the factors together. Matt, did I miss anything on that from your end in terms of?
Oh, he didn't see me shaking my head. No, you're all set. I'm good. Thank you.
Will there be a certain type of mask required? For example, the N95?
No, the guidance is pretty clear in terms of what can and can't be used, and they refer to them as face coverings, and that's in our plan in terms of what students and faculty staff have to wear. The N95s are a special version, higher quality. We're making sure that our nurses have the N95 masks, but other than the nurses, they'll be the only ones required to have the N95s. Certainly if a student had their own and wanted to bring it in, or a faculty member or staff member, that's up to them, because we're giving people the choice. As long as it meets the minimum standard of what's required for a face covering, then we would certainly allow it. The N95s would be a higher level. So.
And along that same line, will the school provide masks for students who do not have them?
Yes, we're encouraging our employees as well as our students to bring their own, kind of focusing on that first P in PPE. We realize it's personal and people have their own comfort levels, their own masks that they're wearing out and about now. So we figured we obviously would honor that, and people wanted to bring their own in, wear their own, but we will have masks available and face coverings available for people who need them, forget them, you know, they drop them, they get dirty, whatever the case may be. Our buses will have them, classrooms will have them, so that students and staff members can utilize one of our ones that we have if they need to.
So if you pick the hybrid model of learning and something happens or you feel uncomfortable, do you have the ability to change and go remotely?
Going back to the survey question and the data, the more consistent, the more solid information we get, and the earlier we get it, the better we can plan and provide the program that we want and the safety that we want. That's why we have the deadline of August 12th. That's why we're trying to get the information from the survey. That said, we realize there are extenuating circumstances, and we want to be sensitive to individual needs, whether it's our employees or our students, and we're trying very hard to do that. So we're asking people to make that commitment for our planning purposes so we can do the best that we possibly can. But we do realize and we do understand that there are extenuating circumstances, and we will work with people to the best of our ability to meet requests as things change. We realize that this is a very, very fluid situation, and that things are going to change. And whether it's someone's employment, whether it's comfortability in the building, we understand that, and we will certainly try to work with people the best we can. But we are asking people to commit to that time frame. It's one trimester at the elementary and one quarter at the middle school and high school.
And at this point, do you have any idea of how parent pickup will be at the elementary level?
No, the parent pickup, we're expecting our numbers to change in terms of the number of people riding the bus. And with that, which is why it's a question on the survey, we're trying to get an idea of what people are thinking and feeling regarding the bus ride. The number of students on the bus versus number of parents who are picking up and dropping off will impact how we design or redesign the parent pickup. We do know that we have some limitations, right? Our school buses can only really go in certain ways and certain routes and loops based on just the size of moving those buses in and out. So in some cases, we're kind of probably tied in to our current setup. In other cases, we certainly want to look at what's available and analyze what the best option is to get students in and out of the building. So we'll do the best we can with that. And again, it might change how we do things. We are trying to make sure that we have the temperature checkpoints, the entry points, the scanners at the parent pickup or parent drop off, excuse me, so that we're trying to get students in as quickly as possible, yet as safely as possible. And we know the more points of entry we have, the better our ability is to spread out our students, provide the social distancing that we need, provide shorter lines to get students through. So we've invested in more than one scanner per building. Tentatively, we're looking at 5 at the high school, 3 at the middle school, and 2 at each elementary, 1 in transportation. So we're going to have those scanners available so that we're able to hopefully move students and staff members through pretty quickly. We had a demo on Friday. It's actually here in the district office, the one that we're decided to purchase. They are outstanding, really quick, really user-friendly, really easy to use. A square comes up, you put your head into it, it tells you within a second or two your temperature, The accuracy has been tested and proven. And one of the concerns we had is in some of the models we've been told that the scanners need to be acclimated to the climate for 15 minutes, and the person whose temperature they need to be in the room for 15 minutes prior to. So it impact if you're coming off a school bus and you were hot or cold. These do not have that. So we're pretty confident in the accuracy of the scanners that we're purchasing and then the number of entry points that we have.
We have had quite a few people come on after we started, and I just want to remind you that at the bottom there's a Q&A function. If you have a question, just ask it down there. The chat box is not functional, so we're just using the Q&A. And also, if you ask a question and you feel like it hasn't been answered, it probably was answered earlier on, and we will be recording this and posting it later on onto our website.
And I think, Brian, important to note too, that Brian's here and he's doing a nice job of filtering through. A lot of the questions that we're getting are similar to a question. Might not be the exact wording, obviously, but they're similar to questions. So if your exact question is not read or wording is a little bit different, I think Brian's trying to summarize for us to get through as many different topics as possible. And also, I don't know if you mentioned earlier, he's utilizing the Reopen website as well in preparation. So he has questions that have been pulled from there. We know a lot of people have been putting really good questions in there. So we've pulled questions from there that will kind of intermingle through the night as well.
All right, so if a child has cold-like symptoms and will they be required to have a COVID test? If not, will they have to stay home from school for 10 to 14 days? And if they do, what will their continuity of instruction look like?
That's a concern, right? We are looking to streamline that and improve that process in our minds of how that's going to look, knowing it's probably going to have to be adjusted at some point. The plan right now, and I kind of may go around a little bit to answer this question, but the plan right now is if a student is exhibiting symptoms in the building, and by symptoms, it could be anything, right? A stomach virus, a stomach ache, a headache, a cough. We are not sending a student directly to the isolation room. Our nurses, led by our co-directors of nursing, Val Miller up at the high school and Rebecca Everett, have really been working very hard this summer and have been in contact with their nursing colleagues, with the Department of Health, with our school physician, Dr. Silverman. And we have in our minds how this is going to work. And like I said, we're going to continue fine-tuning it. But as a student displays symptoms, they're going to be sent to the office, nurse's office, health office. That's what you would think of as the health office. We're kind of considering to be a clean room. That room will not have anyone in it who is experiencing COVID symptoms. So the nurse would greet the student at the door and be able to kind of triage and quickly observe, make a decision. If they feel like the student is having more of a COVID type symptom, then they will go to the isolation room. That isolation room is set up. Students are still 6 feet apart. They're still wearing masks, still ventilation, all the things you'd want in that room anyway. They'll be supervised in that room. And then if they're not exhibiting those symptoms, then they'll be brought into the nurse's office where they'll be able to be examined in a more traditional manner. We want to make sure we keep the health office as the clean room, because you have students getting medications, asthma and all sorts of things that happen in there not related to this. So that guidance has been clear and something we obviously agree with, and we're doing our best to plan for in terms of making sure we have the spaces are set up with easy access in and out, that they're big enough, that there's access to bathrooms and the ability to wash hands and all those type of things that we'll need to do. So I think that sort of answers the question. There was one clarification I wanted to share that literally came out this afternoon. If I could find it on my phone. And that is, the Department of Health clarified today that any students returning to school after missing school for any illness, it's now stated that prior to returning, a child must submit clearance from a medical provider for any illness. So ear infection, stomach virus, flu, COVID-19, and documentation of a current negative COVID test. That is breaking news. We got that from our directors of nursing, and we'll be following up with that in terms of how that impacts us. But when I say the ball's constantly moving, that's kind of a good example. They sent that after 4 o'clock today with some new guidance and clarification coming out. So we'll continue to monitor that stuff. We'll make sure we're doing all the things that we need to do. But there's just one, sorry about that. The lights went off in here, so.
So this question we've had a few different ways and posed quite a few times. If I have a brother or a sister with a different last name, or my child is one's in middle school, one's in high school, will they be able to be on the same schedule so that the parent can plan for childcare for the days that they're virtual?
So we're breaking students up in the hybrid model 6-12 alphabetically. So we did that in an effort to make sure the 6-8 and the 9-12 students were together to help parents out in terms of childcare and just ease. So we'll continue to follow that and make sure those students are together wherever possible. We do know, again, just like anything else, there's a lot of individual variations. We have students who are siblings that have different last names, and they might not fall in the same half of the alphabet. So we know there's extenuating circumstances such as that. We'll certainly take all of them into account. I would encourage you to, obviously contact either Rob over at the middle school or Heath at the high school. They're doing the best they can. Right now, we're not making any determinations, to be quite honest. We're getting what we have, and we will kind of go through them again. We're trying to do things on an individual and a case-by-case basis. For us, planning purpose-wise, the more we can stick to the plan, the better we can do in terms of class size guidelines and transportation routes and making sure that we're equally distributing our students and all the things that we're trying to do. So we really want to hold that line wherever and whenever possible. But again, extenuating circumstances, we'll try to review individually and make the best decision for our students and our families.
Who is going to be responsible for cleaning all surfaces that students touch frequently, whether it's at the elementary or changing classes up in the middle and high school?
So our custodial staff, our supervisor, superintendent of building grounds, Aaron Hefner, and his crew have been doing a great job planning, preparing, stocking up. We've talked about adjusting things on their levels so that we may have an adjustment in shift times. So maybe some of our second shift folks that coming in earlier, that type of thing. We have, in our last administrators meeting, reviewed carefully what we're defining as high touch areas so that we're all consistent in all of our buildings with what is a high touch area. And those areas can be ones that they're hitting the most frequently and doing them as often as possible. Aaron's setting up a schedule so people are rotating and getting to those points throughout the day. We've talked about how to clean desks and space inside the day itself. So easier at the end of the day, right, when we have time to do it. How do we do it during a transition time? We've talked with the Teachers Association about providing those cleaning materials to teachers so they have the ability to do it for their own comfort level as well as the comfort level of their students. And the spray we have is pretty simple. It's a spray. I think it requires like a 1-minute kill time. So you could spray, let it sit, and then go back and wipe it off. Obviously there's issues there because we want to make sure we're doing that properly and making sure people have what they need, if gloves or what have you, in order to do it. We also want to make sure we have the proper supervision in the hallway because students will be in the hallway. And we know sometimes, if you're teaching in a class, those transition times might be when you have to run to a restroom yourself. So we're trying to build all these things into account and making sure we're doing it as comprehensively as we can and making sure we're getting the high touch areas as often as we can and then providing individuals with the supplies that they need to clean as often as they can. We'll have hand sanitizer in the rooms. So hand sanitizer stations throughout the hallways. So we're going to be able to, I think, effectively keep things as clean as we possibly can, from the temperature checks at the beginning of the day, all the way through the hand sanitizers, the hand washing breaks, the cleaning of materials, the high touch areas, and keep the building as clean as possible, as well as the ventilation, which has been a focus.
Have you received guidance for what testing will look like? Do teachers and staff need to be tested before coming to work? And is there a schedule for what happens if there is a positive test?
So by testing, I assume they mean COVID-19 testing. No, we're not requiring students or staff to be tested prior to. As I said from the update, there's some kind of clarification coming out regarding if you're ill in terms of needing a test. That seems to be something that is brand new and I'm not completely familiar with. So there'll be some testing potentially because of that. But in terms of testing students or staff prior to coming back to school or back to work, no, we're not doing that.
Will there be a change to the bus schedule? Will buses run earlier so that the day isn't shortened due to temperature checks being conducted on arrival?
Our transportation department is very actively developing routes and trying to work through all those type of questions. It's going to look very different for us. From 612, if you're picking up half of the kids, that's very different. And even in the elementary, if we try and do these runs to balance things out a little bit, it's going to look different. I don't know if the runs are going to start earlier in the day or not. I honestly don't know. We are building time into the schedule. The principals at all three levels are building time into the beginning of the day with some of the time that's not as much of the structured class time, so that as the bell rings, there's some leeway there, a little bit of a buffer for students when they come in, so we can get them in and get them situated before first period actually starts, so we're not unequally disrupting period one or whatever the first part of the day is instructionally for students. So we're trying to develop our master schedules in our buildings accordingly. And the same thing at the end of the day, where we're really trying to factor in how long it's going to take to get students on the bus. The old way, right, of, you know, bell rings and kids run out of their classroom and through hallways and get on buses is going to be different. We're not going to be able to do that. So we're going to be controlling that a lot more, which means slowing it down in essence. So whether you're dismissing by room or by row within a room, and that's for all things. That could be bells in between, it could be to lunch, it could be to dismissal. So everything is going to take a little bit longer. There's no two ways about it, but we want to do it as safely as we can.
In the event that remote learning is required, will the district be able to provide all students with a Chromebook?
I've been waiting for a question from Matt for a while, so I am going to hand that over to him right now and listen to him talk.
I knew that was coming. So the answer is kind of, it depends on the age of the child. We were blessed with some good news for once on Friday. We had placed an order for Chromebooks, some new Chromebooks, back in early June that we thought were supposed to arrive in July, and we're told it may be October before they arrive because of a distribution supply issue. We found out on Friday that they actually are arriving this week, tomorrow as a matter of fact. What that allows us to do is to continue our one-to-one plan, which has been for the last few years, providing Chromebooks to our 6th graders, while at the same time our 7th graders, our 8th graders, 9th graders, and now our sophomores have all received a Chromebook from prior one-to-ones from previous years. The one change we made for this coming year is we also added in our juniors and seniors to our plan. So we know that based on this new shipment, every student in grades 6, 11, and 12 will be receiving a new Chromebook for this school year. That also allows us to take our existing Chromebooks, the ones that in prior years our high school was using. They will no longer need to share Chromebooks in the building. We can now take that supply of Chromebooks and redeploy them to elementary school. I believe that will get us very close to a one-to-one. If not, it might actually be enough to do one-to-one in our elementary, where the students would be able to take the device home if we were in a remote situation. So we feel very fortunate that order is coming in, because we were going to be doing a lot of scrambling to try to make this work. And I think we'll have a lot more breathing room to be able to provide devices for all of our students.
Now we have a question that is more about athletics. Our athletic director is not on today, but question is if a student chooses to do fully remote learning, would that child be able to participate in a school sport provided athletics return at the end of September?
I am not sure of that answer. I believe that the answer is yes, that they will be able to do that. I think they actually have to be able to play sports or do clubs. I don't know that for sure, though, to be honest with you. Matt, you don't know that one offhand, do you?
No, but I guess I'm leaning the same way as you are, which is that this is not a homeschool situation, which they would not be able to participate. They are still a student of our school district. So my assumption is that they would, but again, I'm hesitant to commit to any answer because we don't know that for sure.
So along the same lines, will clubs be offered throughout school, whether you're in remote or a hybrid or virtual, any learning model?
The plan right now for clubs and activities is to offer them and do it virtually and do it remotely. So we're working through that. Again, it's going to be a different year, and it's one of the details we're looking at to hammer out. We have decided at this point that we're not going to do late buses. So we traditionally have late buses on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We won't be doing those. So without late buses, it'll be harder to do clubs in person and activities in person. So our thought at this time would be to continue to have them and have them meet remotely where possible. We don't want to disenfranchise the students who either are at home on their hybrid day or at home because they're doing virtual learning, or who can't stay after because they can't get a ride themselves. So I think right now we are looking to keep kids as active as we can, as engaged as we can, but to do it virtually through our clubs.
Why is a hybrid model not offered for K through 5 students?
Matt,
do you want to start with that one?
Sure.
We've talked a little bit about that.
Yeah,
sure.
I think, Dr. Frenchie and I discussed this a little bit before we came on, and one of the driving forces in deciding to move to 100% at K-5 was what we saw during our spring and when we were 100% remote. It was very clear from talking to teachers, parents, and also just doing the research and reading what was out there that probably one of the most critical things that we needed to strive to achieve in our reopening was to ensure that our youngest learners, our K-5 elementary learners, had the opportunity to have personal contact with a teacher on a daily basis. So that means if we can get them to school, then we should absolutely try to do that. And that supports both their academic needs and their social emotional needs. So when we were given the opportunity to look at doing 100%, that was our preference because we saw what not being able to do that in the spring, the impact that had. So it was very important for us to be able to bring them back. And we know that having teachers working with kids at especially our younger population requires a lot of hands-on time. So if our students are working both in school and remote, it becomes very challenging for our elementary teachers to be able to address the needs of both our in-school and at-home learners. So the way that it's structured with 100% having kids there, we're going to need all of our staff and then some to be able to address our in-person learners as we always have. And that became our highest priority.
Can you explain how art, music, physical education, etc. will be handled?
Sort of sounds like another question for Matt, I'm thinking, if he wants to try that one out.
Thanks. Well, and I'll let you jump in too, because we've talked about this a lot too. I think this depends on the level. We expect that our special areas in our secondary will be handled like they always have. They're scheduled classes. The kids would be able to move into those spaces to take those classes. At the elementary, it becomes a little more challenging because our spaces become more challenging. We are, in order to bring all of our students back, we're taking over pretty much any classroom space we can find, and that would include our art rooms, our music rooms, our libraries, our gymnasiums. We still expect to be able to offer specials. We're just not quite sure how we are going to address it at this time. We know we could probably utilize outdoor space while the weather is still nice, but obviously that's not going to last forever. And at some point, we will have to consider how we can still provide those same instructional opportunities for our special areas in our classrooms. And it may be, kids staying in the room and the teacher coming in or teaching remotely. We're still kind of working through the logistics of that.
What will the process be for informing parents and the public if someone tests positive within the school for COVID?
So that was a big conversation topic in our Department of Health meetings, and something we've been in contact with our attorneys on. We are somewhat limited, right, in terms of how we would communicate and what we would communicate. We've talked to the Department of Health extensively about how they do their contact tracing, and they've been pretty clear that what they'll call, if they get a case or when they've gotten a case, and they've said, we've done these small businesses, big businesses, Walmart, you name it. What they do is they try to use the contact tracing methods that they have to identify people, and then they contact those people. And they say something like, you may have been potentially exposed, on such and such a day. They don't or won't get into the very specific details of it was this kid in this class. That it's not the guidance that we've received that we would be doing from the Department of Health. And we want to protect students' confidentiality. We also want to make sure we're informing parents correctly. Something I know the county we've talked about is they do update their numbers. I believe it's a daily briefing and daily posting at the end of the day. So you can get information there from the cases and the town or the age of the person. I think that information is all available through them. But the COVID-19 piece of this, in terms of someone testing, someone being an active case, is really a county Department of Health issue in terms of how it is tested, traced, follow-up. That really comes from them at their guidance. So we'll follow their lead. We've talked to them about how to communicate if and when it was to happen. We would use Brian, our moderator, who would be available to help us out as our communication specialist. And Brian has the knowledge of the whole Questar BOCES, and they have a communications department there. So we would use the professionals that are doing this, and we would communicate it as much as we could and as effectively as we could, while still maintaining confidentiality and following the laws that we have to follow from that regard.
Will students be on a pass-fail grading scale this first semester, or is it going to be going back to how it normally was?
And as we mentioned, we learned a lot from the spring, and one of the things that we know we need to do, regardless of our model this fall, is to increase the rigor and the accountability of our students. We are being held to the same standards that we always are from New York State in terms of meeting the critical learning standards, meeting our attendance requirements. So we expect to be still to go back to utilizing our traditional grading system, regardless of whether our students are working in a hybrid model, a remote model, or 100% in person.
Will class sizes be smaller for in-school learning across the board from K through 12?
We would expect them to be. We have, obviously, with the rooms having the desks socially distanced, we need to have smaller numbers of kids in rooms. So from that part, we expect it to be smaller because we have to fit them appropriately in the same area. We are using things, for example, we have classrooms that have open walls. So we're going to use two classrooms that become one. We're using some of our larger spaces like that. So there's some flexibility there where you might have a larger class because it's really two classrooms, physically spaced classrooms, but only one group of kids in there. And the class that was in the other, if there's two classes, they'd be combined. I'm sorry, if there's two classes, this class might go to a different space, and then you open that wall and that bigger space becomes for that one class. So in some ways you'll have maybe class sizes that are about the same or the same, but be able to use a bigger space. If you're in the gym, for example, or one of those larger spaces, then we could put more students in there potentially because it's a larger space and we could space them out appropriately. So in some cases I would say it'd be the same. In most cases I would say it's probably going to be smaller. It also will depend on the number of students whose families choose for the virtual instruction. So if there's a lot of those who are out, then that's going to impact class size. That's why we're also waiting on class lists at the elementary so we can, again, more equally distribute students. So we're to kind of wait and see in terms of that information, but we would expect it to be at the same or smaller.
Do you have any idea when class lists and teacher assignments are going to come out?
We really don't, to be honest. Again, the survey closes on the 12th. Our goal is to make sure that data is as solid as can be. Matt's been looking at it, and we have a lot of things we have to deal with in terms of duplicates, and we're going to use the last timestamp on there if we have the same child listed more than once. So we'll have to use timestamps to kind of go through that, sort that data out. We know, like any survey, you're not going to get 100% participation, so we're going to have to make phone calls and get a hold of people as best we can. And then once we do that, it's sort of putting everything together and working through those things like class lists and bus routes and all that stuff. So as soon as we can, but certainly I would expect it to be later than normal, that's for sure.
Will students be able to see a mock setup of what a classroom will look like and how moving through the hallways will look like prior to the first day of school?
It's a really good question. We don't have a plan for that. I think something that we've kind of talked about doing, have not solidified, is using video. We've used that a lot since I've been back in the district for 3 years. Brian does a lot of those videos for us and does a great job with them. So, I think that's something we'd be able to do. We have one task force on the reopening of school in the district, and underneath that there's multiple subcommittees, and those subcommittees have been talking in some cases about videos, doing kind of PSA type announcements in terms of mask wearing and social distancing, hand hygiene. All those things are in the plan. They're required for us to do, and we're doing those. But yeah, I could see maybe the potential to do something where you're kind of walking through a building to kind of show what it looks like, especially the classrooms. Maybe just do something there so you can see what a classroom looks like, so students are kind of preset before they come in. Yeah, it's a good idea. We hadn't really talked through that much. It's kind of further on down the list, but it's something we need to certainly consider.
For the middle school and high school, will teachers travel to the classrooms, or will students travel still as they normally do?
The students will be traveling at the middle school and the high school. So we'll be able to hopefully do that safely through the hybrid model with less kids. And as I said, we've talked a lot about how we're going to move kids in the classroom, staying to the right of the hallway, using only certain stairwells at the high school for up and some for down. So there's all sorts of things we've built in terms of how we're going to move kids. Again, it's not going to be kind of the traditional bell rings and everyone goes at one time. It's going to have to be much more spaced out, much more thought out, much more deliberate, and we'll do it appropriately.
Can teachers choose virtual teaching? And if so, who will monitor the students who are physically at school?
So our teachers, we've been working through our human resource department, our director of personnel development, to work with our faculty and our staff who are in need of accommodations. And there's a whole process for that. And we're working on that on the employee side. Again, we want, obviously, our employees here. We have great faculty and great staff, and we want them here because it's the only way the district functions well. But we, again, certainly understand that there's extenuating circumstances and accommodations that we need to make, and we'll do the best we can to support them, to make sure that we're providing what we need to for our folks. I think the second part of the question involved who will be supervising the kids. If the students are here in the building, then they'll have a teacher in front of them, or some other teacher aide or someone supervising them. So students will never be unsupervised, if that was the question. So in our mind, if you're here, you obviously have to be supervised. If we're remote or you're virtual, going back to Matt's talk about the semantics of it, then obviously you don't need the supervision because you're not here. But for those who are here, we will certainly provide the supervision we need to.
If we have already submitted our parent choice form and want to change our mind before school starts, is there a strict deadline for making that decision? And if we have already submitted, can we change?
Matt is in charge of our data, so I'll let him answer that. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to let him go with that one.
Well, we definitely are still sticking with the deadline of the 12th for submitting it. So we are asking families to do that. And again, as Dr. Franchini said, a lot of that is because of the work it will take once we know our final numbers to determine, sections for virtual learning, how we'll deliver virtual learning at the different levels, following up with families that didn't complete the survey. So there's quite a bit that will need to be done, which is why we're asking for the hard deadline of the 12th. That being said, until the 12th, if you've already submitted and changed your mind, you can resubmit on the form. One of the things was mentioned earlier is we will kind of go back into all the data that was submitted through the form and look for duplicates and basically take the last entry. So if you submit it 4 times, we're going to take the 4th one as your final answer, if you will. So we will make sure we go through and remove all the other ones and just take your last submission to the form.
As masks have to be worn throughout the day for students and teachers, can you explain how mask breaks will work?
Yeah, I think we covered that a little bit earlier in terms of how we're going to do it. I don't know specifically. The building principals are really kind of diving into that. I know some of our subcommittees have been looking into that. We are going to schedule them during the day. We want to utilize outside as much as we can. We want to utilize even just going through a walk in the hallway, 6 feet apart, that type of thing. So we'll give students a chance. We're looking at guidance. We received stuff from Dr. Silverman, who's our school physician, in terms of what a mask break can and can't look like, or should or shouldn't look like. And the stuff that we've read and been given is, you're always better when there's 2 people wearing a mask, but it's okay. It's better to have at least one wearing a mask. So if a student needs a quick mask break in a room, if you have a corner in your room where they can go maybe and take their mask off, if the people around them have the mask on, there's still some safety built into that. So it's obviously better if both are wearing, but in the case where a student needs a quicker break, a shorter break, maybe that can be done in the classroom. If not, again, there's hallways and there's larger areas and there's outside. So we'll work through that. It's certainly something that we need to spend some time on as we get closer to this and finalize that process and make sure we're doing it and doing it consistently across the district. Again, being developmentally appropriate, knowing that it's quite a range from kindergarten to 12th grade. So we'll let our principals and our teachers kind of work through that with the guidance from our nurse and from our school physician and the Department of Health, and come up with the best plan we can. I don't have details on that now, though.
If a student receives free lunch and they are in a hybrid model and they're at home, how will they be able to receive that lunch?
We're very committed to making sure that our students receive meals. It was something that was required of us in March through June, and we feel like we did a really good job of that. Colleen Wise, our food service director, and the people that surrounded her, Mark Bubniak, our athletic director, really helped out quite a bit. Mark Primo in transportation in that department. And we made sure that we were able to get the food delivered to those who needed it and get food available to be picked up for those who needed it. And countless volunteers. We had some with perfect attendance who were in working and making those lunches and manning the stations. So we'll have the short answer to the question is we'll make sure that the students who are on free and reduced lunch receive their meals. The details of that I don't know. Again, we've talked a little bit through it. It might be the situation, especially at 612, if I'm a hybrid student and I'm on free and reduced, maybe at the end of the day I get my lunch for the next day, and then you don't have to worry about coming back because we understand transportation can be an issue. So that might be a way to do it. We may have a distribution point, and maybe it's in one of our parking lots during the day, or so we don't know, because we know we're going to want to service kids who are virtually and kids who are hybrid. So we got to work through those details, but we certainly are committed. We're running a summer program through the county to make sure our students who need help are getting it. We have our backpack kids, and that program has been very strong. Our food pantry kids. So we're K through 12. We have those options. We have a connection to our local food pantries, and we work closely with those folks to both give and take as needed to make sure all the food pantries are stocked, as well as our food pantry here and our backpack program here. So we'll continue to work with our community agencies and our different departments to make sure that we're getting to our students that we need to, and making sure they're doing everything we can to make sure they're not going without food.
If there are no after-school late buses and the virtual model of school is on a set schedule, will there still be an opportunity for extra help for students?
No late buses and virtual. So from understanding, the students who choose to not be in, or for the students who are here but can't stay after because we don't have buses, that's a good question. I think during the day we'll still have opportunities. I don't know the details of that yet, but you're looking at access at the middle school and advisory at the high school, study halls. So there'll be time built into those days. If we're virtual or someone's virtual teachers can utilize some of their time, perhaps, they're after school. Our faculty is great at staying after to help kids out. So if there was no late buses, I'm sure teachers would be willing to stay after with students, but virtually. Those things I think we'd have to figure out kind of on a case-by-case basis. I think our folks do a really good job of meeting kids where they are and doing what they can to support them. So I'm sure we'll handle that as best we can and rely on our professionals who do a wonderful job with that.
For students who are either driving or will be dropped off at the younger levels, will there be a certain time when you can do drop-offs?
Yes, that information will be coming. We'll have a drop-off time and location, and all that plan will be communicated as it's developed. Again, I keep kind of going back to the survey, but if we need that information to find out how many people are going to be in person versus how many are going to be virtual, and how many of those people are driving or being dropped off. That information is all going to be very instrumental in the plan details that we develop as we work through this.
Another question that we've gotten quite a bit is high school and middle schoolers, the transition between classes. How will that be addressed to keep students socially distanced?
I think Heath and Rob could talk a little more clearly about that. This is a shameless plug for people to tune in tomorrow to our principal-led Q&A. We're going to have one for elementary, and that'll be combined, one for the middle school and one for the high school. We're doing them at different times so that people who have students at multiple buildings can pop in and out of the three of them. We're recording all of them, so they'll be on the website too for people who can't watch them live. But I'll kind of, leave that up to those folks. I've already kind of mentioned some of the stuff you know, whether it's dismissing students a little more deliberately from classrooms when bells ring, having students walk on the right side of the hallway, utilizing one stairwell for up and one for down. Those type of things are all being thought about and planned. Different colored zones in the building to minimize the use of bathroom crossover, or, you know, the 8th grade bathroom in the middle school, really sticking that to being just 8th graders. So using those closer bathrooms, using proximity and trying to minimize traffic and flow. And the term you'll see in the guidance is cohorting, to try to do that as best we can. But Rob and Heath can certainly answer that better than I can. They can answer most things better than I can. So yes, they're very good.
Will emergency drills still be conducted? An example, the fire drills or lockdown drills?
Per the guidance, we have to. So yes. I think the follow-up question to that would be, how are you going to do that? And I don't know. We do know we have to do it. And there's been all sorts of talk. Deputy Nichols and I have been in communication, and we'll work through with him and our partners at the state police to make sure we're doing the drills for the lockdowns as safely as we can. There's guidance surrounding it in terms of you don't have to empty the whole building at the same time. And we have a challenge there because we want to do it, and we want to do it so that it's appropriate and that it's well done and it's meaningful. But you also want to make sure you're respecting the social distance, and you don't want fire alarms going off throughout the day if possible. So it's a challenge. There's a lot of challenges and a lot of uncertainties with this, as you can imagine. As I tell people, the summer is always a busy time trying to prepare for school to open, and that's when we know what we're doing. So we've done it every year. So in this situation where we don't know so much about what we're doing, when things are changing and it's very fluid, there's a lot of challenges, and that would definitely be one of them, is how do we do that well. So more to come on that.
Well, musical performances, assemblies, large group gatherings that typically occur every year, will they still occur this year?
Yeah, at this time, no, we're not planning any large group events. So the classic things we do, you know, the pep rally at the high school, the musicals, at this point, no, we wouldn't be able to do those, and wouldn't be responsible to do those. Now, can we do some of these things virtually? Heath and I were talking about that this afternoon, actually. Like, what can we do virtually that maybe not can be the same, maybe not can be as good, but can still be done? You know, how do you do Spirit Week a little differently? You know, so all these things, it's going to be trial and error, and we'll do some of the things well, I'm sure, and some of the things maybe not so well, but we'll be able to do the best we can with it, and just try and make it a positive experience, but a different one.
Do you know if Regents and state testing will happen this year?
Let me hop in. You give you a break. We don't know. So if you remember from the spring, the 3-8 assessment that New York State gives is actually, that's a federal requirement, and the state had to apply for a waiver to allow that not to happen. So they will have to do the same if they don't want to deliver those assessments this year. So it'll probably be a while before we know whether or not they're going to apply for that waiver. The decision to deliver Regents is a state decision. Those were canceled very late last school year. It was May before we found that out. We do know that Regents are given in January, so we would expect sometime in the fall to find out if those will continue or not. But that is a local state decision that could be made. But as of right now, we've not heard anything. So the plan is that, yes, they are both being delivered, but there is a possibility that both will be not part of the educational program next year.
For students that are moving into a new building, will there be some type of orientation, whether that's for kindergarten, going into the middle school, and freshmen going into the high school?
Yes, I believe those have been going on virtually in 5th to 6th and I believe in 8th to 9th, they did a lot of that stuff virtually, the things that they would have done in person. And I know kindergarten is kind of a little more challenging. So yes, we'll be doing some form of transition. I would encourage those questions to go to your principals. They're certainly the most knowledgeable about those programs and what they're doing and what they have done already. Does that make sense to you, Matt?
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Is there's been a lot of work being done virtually. As we get closer, I don't know if any of that will change or if it's possible to change any of that person, but they would know those plans better than you or I at this point.
Will GCC still operate their before care and after school programs?
Yes, we consider GCC to be a very important partner for us. They've been in the district for a long time. We actually met with them last week. We had our elementary principals and 2 of the folks from GCC, and we were able to meet with them and talk through. Again, it's one of the challenges because it's going to look different, and it's one of the challenges because in the past we've been very easily able to give them space. So a little bit harder because we're using all available space and we're using it all the time. But our principals have been great. Our partners at GCC have been great. Again, it's a value relationship. We know our community values it. There's no 2 ways about that. And we want to make sure that we're providing that before and after care, and we want to provide it within the building. We feel that's important too. We do know that there are other options in terms of different sites or moving people around, but we know that elementary parents highly value having that program in their home school, and we want to do the best we can with that. So yes, GCC will be with us, and again, might look a little different, right? They have their own guidelines they have to follow from the Office of Children and Family Services, so they've got their own things they have to do and make sure they're following their rules. So they've been running through the summer. They ran through the pandemic months in March and June when we were closed, and they will continue to run during the school year.
Is there anything parents can do to help support you and the school staff?
It's a very nice question. Honestly, and I'm not just saying this because we're on a live Q&A with the community. I tell people all the time, the community for us has been unbelievably supportive, unbelievably patient, unbelievably respectful. And when you look at the interactions I've had personally, when I see people or through the reopened email address or any of the various forums, the way people have already been supportive has been really unbelievable. I mean that honestly. When you open up some of these things, you wonder what you're going to get. And people have just been so respectful and supportive, and really they're asking questions that are very good. They're very detailed in some cases. They're very specific, but they're coming from a place of concern, and they're legitimate questions. I'm a parent myself. They're questions I either have asked or would be asking. So it's a great question, and I thank the person who sent it in. Might have been my wife, I don't know, but it was very nice. And I would just say the community already has been unbelievably supportive, and they've been great, and we thank them for that. I guess going forward, patience and understanding. We're doing the best we can. We certainly are not claiming that anything we've done has been perfect or will be perfect, but we are doing the best we can. We're trying to take things on an individual basis for kids while simultaneously trying to do it from a system point of view. So those are kind of contradictory when you're trying to do things individually, but yet for the system, and trying to do the best we can with it. And just ask for your patience and your understanding and support. And don't be afraid to ask questions. All of our administrators are very, very, very willing to answer questions and get back to you. It might take a little bit longer than normal because we're kind of being inundated, but people certainly will get back to you. And then, yeah, that's it. So thank you. Thanks for asking.
On that note, I think we will be wrapping this up. We had nearly 300 questions come in between the email and our Q&A, and there will be a number of more forums going on this week, so you can definitely tune into those. And if you feel like your question wasn't answered today, you can ask whether it's the building principals or another superintendent Q&A on Wednesday. And this will be, it is being recorded and it will be posted online in the next, probably tomorrow.
No, just thanks to everyone who joined us. I know the participant window's been high. I think it got to about 275-ish or so that I saw. So we've had a lot of people on, which has been great. And we are happy to do it. We're doing the other one tomorrow, as was said by Brian. We're going to do the principal one because we know there's some kind of more specific building questions that are probably on your minds. And we wanted the principals to be able to answer those for you much better than Matt and I could. And then we'll come back on Wednesday. And we thought the time would be different because, you know, people have different work schedules. We wanted to do one a little bit later in the evening like now, and then one in the daytime. We also figured if we do it in the daytime on Wednesday, it gives people a chance to hopefully have all the information they need to complete that survey to the best of their abilities. And, you know, we'll go from there. So we will certainly keep sharing information. And thank you again to everyone for joining us tonight. And thanks for Matt for joining us. We do have a Board of Education meeting at 7:30. So we welcome anyone who would like to stay with us for a little bit longer tonight. And we'll be on at 7:30 for the second act. And we'll have the board meeting. So thank you very much.